All right. So what do you bring?
So I got the whole kit, but today I've got the single malt whiskey. That's for myself, and I brought you a dram of the Brothers Cup Mezcal finish. So that is 104 proof. Here we go. You ready?
Yeah.
All right.
I did have a 90 proof earlier, so I'm
You
warmed
got a
up.
90 proof. See, this that's a little taster, right? It's not
Yeah.
even a finger here for you. So this is our original Brothers Cup bourbon, finished an additional period of time. I think it was 9 months in a used Oaxaca Mezcal barrel.
Wow.
I know that barrel finishing can be kind of polarizing for folks, especially if it's something that you're not necessarily attuned to anyway. And Mezcal is definitely like way out there for folks, and that's what we like. We're a little bit more daring, I would say.
That's amazing.
It's really good, and it's smoky. It's almost got, you definitely notice agave, but it's got kind of a almost peat note in the middle that gets reminiscent of Scotch. It still finishes with that super smoky, almost animal-like sort of funkiness that Mezcal would have on the back end. And all throughout, it's still 3-grain bourbon. It's a high rye bourbon throughout.
Yeah.
So we do some barrel finishing projects, basically almost always having one going all the time. The Mezcal finish was our release right before Christmas, essentially.
Yeah.
We have we did a port finish in the past, and then we have a red Zin barrel on the way. We don't allocate a lot to the barrel finishing because it's just more time. It puts a lot of stress on the bourbon supply for us to just set aside 60 gallons at a time. And it seems like not a lot, but it is for us right now to leave 60 gallons untouched for a while. But
So tell me a little bit about how you all got started and why. And
pour myself.
please. Yeah.
I'm getting over bronchitis here, so I have
okay.
a small amounts.
Because I've been fascinated by, like we were talking a little bit, when I think that was before Christmas, right? When I saw you at the market. So, I started getting into spirits over the summer and just liquor in general because I was bar partner out at Abbott Farms, which is a lot of fun. So I started to get into it more from that. Started working with Pascal's Liquors, and then became aware of like the whole world of allocated bourbon, which I haven't been, and fell victim to all of the let's go out there and try and hunt and find these bottles, and wow, look at what I got, and da 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 da, which is still a lot of fun. But thinking about, I don't know, it's kind of weird. Like if you typically looked at like a mass-produced thing, you would say, "Oh, that's shitty," you know. I mean, Snickers, maybe that's a bad example, but it's a mass-produced, or Hershey bars, that's a better example. Mass-produced chocolate versus sweet on chocolate or nostalgia chocolate, which is craft. So, but it's kind of opposite in this world. Like the mass-produced bourbon, everybody runs after.
It is the one thing where you are frankly not always targeting your most obvious fans because the people who are the most concerned with lineage and allocation, they're not our people.
Yeah.
I mean, they can be. They definitely can be, but we have to talk them through it. If someone is saying, I just want rarity, the game is already fixed for them to appear, whatever they're buying appears rare.
Yeah.
And the pricing is essentially a secondary market pricing that it convinces people that what they have is worth something. It's only worth that if someone's willing to buy it.
Right.
And the fact that, there's only 5,000 bottles that exist, well, there's only 295 of the Mezcal finish, You're essentially having to have the argument that no one else in craft has. It's a little bit, I think you find some parallels when you get into like, let's say like cheese, right? Jewett's out in our area puts out a 24-year aged cheddar that is incredible. And I would put it up against anything worldwide.
Holy shit.
And it's amazing. It's only $60 a pound, right? That won't get the attention of a fresh out of, snuck out of the bag Camembert from France, right? Because it's this it's a Eurocentric thing. It's a Euro supremacist thing, that world. Even though it's something that you can't find anywhere. And they downplay it. They say, oh, we got this thing, and it's whatever. And we're kind of falling into that same niche where people are saying, I want the thing that I hear people talk about. I don't want to miss out. I want the thing that I hear about all the time. I want the Weller. I want the Blantons, whether they want it or not, because it's not available. And if they don't like it, they've already cracked the bottle.
Yeah.
And then it becomes sort of a buyer's remorse scenario as well.
For sure.
So what we're trying to sell people is you know, the local store. You know, this is not everything you get at that level is macro.
Yeah.
Across the board, it is all macro. You kid yourself if you think it's truly that rare. It's just spread wide. And if they can't spread it wide enough to trick you that it's rare, they'll send it overseas. So a lot of whiskey left for India, left for China, that then allowed bigger producers to create a domestic shortage. The shorter the supplies are, the more you can command in terms of your retail arrangements and allocated bottles, and it becomes a little bit of, again, like the fixed race at that point. Now, we don't say in our business that they're doing a bad job. There are some that are very good, and there's some that are exceptional in terms of the macro stuff that's out there. But not all of it is necessarily different and or better than what can be done in small batch, handcrafted stuff. So we got into this business not necessarily to try and, you know, exceed those works, but provide a local option, provide essentially a hands-on option, something that people can relate to on a more intimate level, and truly have something in their hands that is very, very rare and very limited. And that's the nice thing, you know, with the New York sort of system as it's played out, is we are very much a product of our place. And when you buy our stuff, when you get our stuff in a cocktail, it's 100% New York grain. 99% of it is coming from Central New York. You know what I mean? And the barrels are coming from New York. And so you're looking at a greater economic message as well there too as well.
Yeah.
Do we frankly sit around and wring our hands thinking about what big bourbon is doing? Absolutely not. Never. Honestly, like discussions like this come up almost never.
Really?
It's just not our game. We just went into the Distillers Guild meeting. We're all talking about what we're doing because we're all essentially in the same game. Nobody cares what Beam is doing.
Oh, you mean like internally in like the world of local spirits?
In the world of local spirits, but also just in terms of our own operation as well, too.
Yeah.
We don't look at it at all. We're aware of it.
Yeah.
We have to be conversational in these things. When someone comes up and they says, I like, you know, this, you know, Pappy 18.
Yeah.
And I got to say, well, you know, clearly you like bourbon, right? Let me get you to try some things. And sometimes you got some folks who are just, they're the hard case. You know, they say, you get someone like, say, I'm at the regional market. Someone comes up and they go, what's your oldest bourbon? I'm not going to sell that person a thing. They're probably not even going to sample. Because unless I say something like 9 years, it's performative. The whole thing's performative. They're showing up to say, I know something about bourbon.
Yeah.
And for a lot of folks who know bourbon in terms of their own interests, it begins and ends at age.
Yeah.
Not barrel, not grain, not, you know, high wheat, high rye, all, you know, all corn. All those things are all secondary to, I know one thing and I like it old. And what we discovered in this business is that age is 100% relative.
Yeah.
So
do you get a lot of people that come up nowadays that are asking like, what do you have that's like Blanton's or Buffalo or whatever the bottle is?
a little bit, you get a lot of folks who are looking for like a general family. So like our Brother's Cut is a high rye bourbon. So I got to steer people towards things that they would otherwise know in the high rye family. Someone comes up and they're saying, oh, I only like wheated bourbons. I'm probably not going to send them towards the Brother's Cut. I'm actually going to recommend that they try something totally different. I'm going to steer them towards like single malt whiskey. I'm going to steer them towards rye. Because I know that a wheated bourbon is not going to get satisfied by the Brother's Cut. I might send them toward the Field Days. Field Days is an all corn bourbon. Field Days is the one we can't keep in stock, ironically.
Really?
The one that's younger from 100% corn is the one that we absolutely cannot keep up with.
Huh.
It defies all sort of bourbon knowledge in terms of what people expect out of it. They say, oh, well, the Brother's Cut is your premier package. And I said, it is. That's what we send all of our best stuff towards. But price point and availability
Yeah.
are huge in this industry.
Yeah. I switched at the bar. We were Lock 1 just because they're 10 minutes away. And then, you know, for some reasons I won't mention on this podcast, I wound up switching to Field Days for our bourbon. Yep. You know, it's not like we had a big selection, and Abbott's has a farm license, so you can't really get too much.
Field Days gets it done. Field Days is a little workhorse that if you're making cocktails, if you're making drinks, you're day drinking, it gets it done. We do the farmers markets, you know, through the summer, 9 in the morning. You got to have something that people can drink in the sunshine. Yeah. Right. You hit them with 108 proof, overproof bourbon, they're going to get a little gassed out for their day. Right. We do the state fair. We like basically make our name at the state fair on Field Days. The Brothers Cut sells well. But that's for the person who's like, I'm a bourbon person. I'm going to send you right towards that. The field days, though, I mean, we are sold out through first week of March. And then in terms of our supply, it's in stores and it's in distributors. But then that next barrel that opens is essentially already pre-sold.
Wow.
Talk about allocations. It's already allocated, it's just not commanding secondary market. It's just trying to meet the first market,
As a bourbon maker, as a maker of spirits, do you want your stuff to hit a secondary? Like, let's say,
I kind of don't care.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it's out there. I don't know if our stuff commands the cachet yet. I know it has gone to the secondary market. I know that there are certain things that have popped up in bourbon groups and said, hey, I want to do trades, whatever. We've been in package trades before, stuff like that. And I guess that's nice to say, oh, how does it rack up? Again, we're kind of not paying attention.
Yeah.
It's really not good for us. It's kind of like reading your negative Twitter reviews or your positive, like, you know what I mean? Positive or negative. Like, we like the interactions that we have with people.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily glean a lot of information from, just scouring the internet for stuff about ourselves, So like, yeah, have our bottles shown up in like bourbon trade groups? Yeah. I don't know. I didn't follow it to say, oh, what did we finally get sold for or traded for, but I'm aware of it. It has happened. But the thing with us, right, we are truly hyper local to this area. So like, if you were in Texas, pretty much all the Texas distilleries are statewide. And they're all pretty big for the most part. There's some smaller ones. In New York, we are not local statewide because there's so many other choices across the state. We go to Rochester and people go, you're not local enough to us because we've got 3 options within 50 minutes of us,
I fucking hate that so much.
And it's killing us, in terms of like our ability to get in other spaces because people say, well, why would I get you when, I'm in Buffalo, I want to carry Buffalo Distilling, and that's fine. You should, but you can also carry, a wider array than that. It's interesting how limited our circle of distribution truly is in terms of the core of it. 99% of our stuff essentially selling in a certain area, but we sell everything we make. So if we go a little, if we expand the circle, every time that circle expands, we've got to pick up pace a little bit,
Yeah.
So I think it's a better sign of organic demand if we can hit a max point in a certain area and say, okay, when we got 45 accounts in Syracuse or whatever it was, and 25 accounts in Binghamton and 20 accounts in Utica and 10 accounts in Henrietta and that area, that we were just basically barely keeping up. And then it's time to say, okay, how can we add a little bit on to expand the circle, make a little bit more without going crazy and taking on the $3 million expansion product and then overshooting your organic demand.
Yeah.
And that's everyone's kind of like scare story right now.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you like shoot too big. And like right now, like there are distilleries that are in the process of taking their first big scale up jump. And it's like, I hope it's there for you.
Yeah.
I hope you have reason to do this because the big examples in like the beer world, they flame out pretty hard when they happen.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. The beer world is, I've said it a lot, Tim and Crystal who are listening to this, you can keep your comments to yourself.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Oh,
Tim and I are very good friends. I named my son after him. I didn't, but Tim likes to tell everybody that I named my son Timmy.
Yeah.
And I have the opinion there's too many breweries in central New York, maybe New York State, I don't know, but in central New York, I think there's too many. I mean,
I gotta be careful talking about breweries because they are really good partners for us.
yes. Yeah.
They more so than a lot of other traditional accounts really support us because they know what the struggle is.
Yeah.
So we do business with those folks and a lot of other people in town. Is it near saturation at this point? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that the cautionary tale has already happened in Empire Brewing
Yeah.
in terms of what happens when you overshoot and you end up with overhead that's just out of control. And I think that was probably a very good thing for the area. I think that there have been some very creative folks in brewing who have really helped introduce us as a brand to whole other areas of folks who wouldn't necessarily be into it. the breweries are a weird scene in terms of drinking scene,
Yeah.
and there's they're not all comfortable with hard alcohol.
Yeah.
Some of them are into it. Some of them are totally fine, and they accept it and do really well with the cocktail program. Other places it's kind of like, well, it's not really what we focus on. Also, like this is my house,
Yeah.
and there's this perception that the moment you start giving people bourbon old fashions, like the pants fall off, right? And then you know, and it's like, yeah, when you get there on the beer too, like
Yeah.
it's all about the setting you create
Right.
versus what people are necessarily drinking. But we I don't know that it's saturated in my mind so much as everyone is just sort of, again, hyper localized.
Yeah.
So if you're on the south side, you're in Jamesville, right? You're at Heritage Hill, you're in Cicero, you're at Ha House, you're a downtown person, you're at Barrett Acorn, you're around the SU, you're at Willow Rock, you're having lunch downtown, you're at Dogger's. Like everyone has a little niche that fits.
Yeah.
I do wonder where the brand building starts.
Yeah.
So for us, we don't have a physical location that is truly anything more than a tasting room. We never fell into the trap of gotta have food, gotta be open, gotta have drinks. And we would make more money up to a point having a restaurant, but it's not what we wanted to do. We're a production facility. So as places start to kind of end up in that gray area between, are we a restaurant, are we a brewery, are we canning for Wegmans, or are we just filling growlers for people to take home? I wonder if people get a little bit off track in craft beverage, the more that they end up chasing the food dollar. You know?
I think, the dream come true is like the small anything that exists where you can have the smallest kind of footprint and you can operate it and run it yourself and not run yourself ragged because you're there, 1,000 hours a week and da-da-da-da. I mean, I think in a lot of cases, no matter what you're doing in food and beverage, whether you're distilling or brewing or making tacos, that's sometimes can be like the best case scenario. It's kind of like when you kind of shoot the moon, I feel like, maybe that's when it gets out of hand, kind of like what you were saying with Empire. I mean, Empire is an extreme example, but
it's the extreme. There are middle steps between where we see certain things from a distance. We say, I wonder if that's what they always intended, or if this is what it is to get by.
Yeah.
I know, like, we're very good friends with the folks out at Hot House, and they did not intend to have a bistro. But the moment people started coming around, they realized this is the best thing for our business, is to have a bistro. And they went full at it, and the folks out there really embraced it and made it good, but it wasn't what they intended, from the start. That wasn't what they were planning on. In our case, we knew right away that our location, so we're out in Lebanon, which is the middle of nowhere. It's half Amish. We knew right away that we would not be anything more than an agritourism destination. We just don't have the proximity there to have a venue, or at least like a 4-day-a-week venue. Like we could be a thing twice a summer.
Yeah.
But that's about it. It's a 11-acre farm out there. It's a farm we grew up on as kids, working on back when it was a horse farm. We took the original horse stable and gutted it out, and didn't necessarily give us a lot of room beyond production. We just have a little bit of space for tasting, and it feels authentic. And I shouldn't even say it is authentic. It is very much a farm distillery, and for a lot of folks who come out to visit, that's the experience that they're seeking, is that the tour, the hospitality, the family feel of it, whatever. What they're not necessarily looking for is like giant Jenga in the and in the loading dock, or bubble, seating outside on the street, it's just not what we do. You come out and you're welcome to hang out and be family and have a lunch out on the picnic tables and all that. But in terms of what we're providing, it's truly about the production, and always has been.
Do you get a lot of people that come out there for visits?
We do in the summer. It's pretty good. I have to say, for maybe the last 9 months to a year, it's definitely been slowing down with gas prices and things slowing down a little bit economically. The trade-off, though, is that we were doing very well in stores, so people are aware of our stuff. They're just not necessarily, coming out to see us every time. They are able to get in the stores. They're able to find us at farmers markets, so they're not necessarily always making the trip. I would say that we have started to maybe max out our exposures to a certain area. So it's kind of like everyone in Cazenovia or everyone in Hamilton at this point or everyone in Norwich has essentially had the experience.
Yeah.
So we got to advertise a little bit and get people to come back or get new people to come through. But through the summer, I mean, it's fairly busy.
Yeah.
And part of the bonus there is we don't charge for tours. We don't charge for tastings. We want people to leave with product. We want people to take a bottle with them versus us saying, okay, well, you know, tours run at $1 and $4. Tastings are $16, but they come with a rock glass and whatever the trick it takes to get you to break out some money. I would much rather have someone take a $33 bottle with them, and if they enjoy their experience, leave a tip in the tip jar for the kids. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there's no expectations of that, and we're very honest with folks about that too, as well. That we're a small operator, but you're getting very unheard of access. In a certain way.
So how long have you all been in business? When did you first start?
I had the idea in summer of 2014. I had just moved back to New York. My family was in Tucson, Arizona before that. I was working in the bar business. I'd gone to law school and then transitioned right into working at a bar. It's great. I worked at the.
Did you graduate law school?
I did actually. I didn't just graduate law school. I have a JD and an LLM.
Jesus.
In Indigenous Peoples Law and Policy from the University of Arizona,
What
which I did use. I did use briefly, but I didn't. I ended up getting tricked into. I ended up working my way towards an SJD, so it's a Doctor of Juridical Science. Basically allows you to teach law, and the funding in the middle of it kind of got pulled out. And I was like, well, I gotta pay rent.
Yeah.
I can't just be a grad student taking, because they'll give you student loans forever. You'll die before you pay them off. But so I ended up working in a bar that my friend was at, and I just ended up there for 7 years. And never got that advanced degree. The whole program kind of fell apart. It wasn't really necessarily my doing or their doing, but kind of, I could say we grew apart for sure. But we had, during that time we had children, and it was kind of like, where do you want to be? Tucson's nice when you're like in your 20s. It's not necessarily somewhere you want to have your family long term. And we're from the area. We're from, Lebanon originally, and mom and dad were still there. And it was kind of like, if you come back, you can hang out here until you figure out what you're doing. And we just basically came back, with no plan. Applying to stuff all over the state. And I'm going down, I'm doing interviews in New York City. I was going to do interviews in Vermont. And I was like, this all is like adjacent to where we're trying to be. But if you actually want to be like in Madison County, it became more and more apparent. You have to make it yourself. Yeah. You have to do your own job, essentially. You have to find your own thing. And when I was in the bar business, I watched Hamilton Del Bach, Whiskey Del Bach, come up in Tucson. This is like an early craft distiller. They did a Dorado single malt whiskey that was mesquite smoked. It wasn't my favorite thing at the time, but I was also watching craft just in general change. The bar was, so it was the Buffet Bar and Crockpot. It's the second oldest, like the oldest bar in Tucson, essentially. Second oldest license, longest in one place, I think was the thing. And it was $5 pitchers of Coors, only one beer on tap. We had Maker's Mark for $3.25, and it was like there was a bribe going back decades on how many cases we could achieve at that price. So it was a beer and shot bar. Yeah, and with the exception of a couple of nicer tequilas, we had nothing else. We had all the flavored vodkas, and it was a college dive. It was truly like dive of all dives. Yeah, and all of a sudden people came in and they were like, you have craft beer? And we're like, we don't even know what that is. I'm looking around. I'm like, I got a Blue Moon. Yeah. Right? I don't know. Does that count? And suddenly people are coming in and saying, can you make me, can you make me a Sazerac? And I was like, what color is it? I'll just fake it. What does it take? And all of a sudden everything was changing around us. So it was like 2008, 2010 in there. It was like, you had to have Hendrix. That was like the first step. If you had Hendrix, at the very least, you could supply everyone at least something that made them feel slightly less gross, right? And at the same time, like, people were willing to spend more. They didn't want $5 pitchers. They wanted options. It became very clear that, like, as millennials at that time were getting older in their drinking years, they wanted all the options. And they passed that on as well. To generationally, that's even more so. Now everyone wants every possible option. So we had sort of the premise in mind, like, okay, what if we I know spirits from the bar business. This was truly a whiskey bar, and had no interest in doing beer. What if we took just a quick look through the licensing for New York? And at that time, New York was the be-all, end-all best in the country for getting started as a distillery in terms of the laws and breweries and wineries. The farm and craft act stuff was huge at that time. My brother at that time was in New Zealand running a restaurant on the South Island in New Zealand. He had agreed to go and do 5 years running it for his father-in-law. He was in 6 years at that point. He was beyond his contractual obligations at that point. He had a son at that point, his wife, and he had a son. And they were looking to come back as well. Pitched it to them that summer. We came back, looked over the property and said, if we, put some capital towards this, at the very least, get a house out of it, get a farm out of it. But if it really gets licensed, this could be something really interesting. Pitched mom and dad on being the free help and the babysitters and everything, and just ran at it. Like we put an offer on the property in September of 2014. I think we were closed by like maybe October, maybe November of 2014. I started the licensing December 31st of 2014. We got our federal license back in like record time at that point. Having a law degree helped a little bit. But we essentially got our license within, I think it was like 4 to 5 months. It was impossible to get in that quick. And then we got our state within a few months after that. We did a whole renovation on the barns, totally tore everything apart and rebuilt it as an industrial facility. My brother got working on early recipes during that time.
Had either one of you ever distilled before then?
No. In terms of like sitting down and doing a run all the way through, Aaron had the advantage of being in New Zealand where home distilling was legal. So he had friends who had equipment. He knew people who were making honey-based spirits out there. He had more exposure to it. I knew moonshiners that went out in the desert and made bacanora and all this gross corn liquor and had the awareness of it, had the chemistry awareness of it, knew how it worked, but didn't know necessarily on a commercial level how does it scale. During that time, we took some classes, like that 2015 period. We took some classes. We went out to Black Button. We went to Catskill Distilling. We went out to Glen Rose out in North Rose. Everyone was very friendly in terms of like, this is what it takes. Nobody led you astray in terms of what it would take. What we quickly realized was we were never going to get like German Christian Carl stills. We were never going to get $1 million equipment. We also realized that we were in a very good position being in Lebanon in terms of like code enforcement and zoning and everything. We didn't have to deal with being on municipal water or municipal sewer, or you know what I mean? There's a lot less bureaucracy that we were going to have to deal with. It was kind of intentionally that we knew we were going to work our way that way, but now it's been quite a benefit. It's still heavily regulated. Yeah. It's just I don't have to worry about a sewer inspector coming in. You know what I mean? Saying where does all this go? It's compost. Right? But it's been interesting how quickly we got to production, and then essentially taught ourselves the rest along the way. So we were selling by December of 2015. So within less than a year, we had product out. We had corn whiskey, right, unaged, 100 proof, but we had to get some income going. And we said, all right, if we get some income going, at the very least, we can start to build a brand over time. Let it start to build up. My brother was tapping trees that winter, doing a syrup project. We took that syrup and put it towards our maple whiskey. First batch of that, huge success. I did a kind of a basic gin recipe, took a shot at it, tweaked it a little bit, ran it out. That's literally been our gin recipe ever since, just based on playing chef for a couple of R&D periods. We had apples on the property. My brother and mom and dad sat there and pressed all those cider apples to make, I think, 56 bottles of unaged apple brandy the first year, as an eau de vie, Applejack, and, whatever it took to get it out there. And I think that also really set the tone for people that it is going to be farm-based. It is going to be small batch. It's very local and it's very family-oriented, And then everything in the barrel was going on at the same time, trying to, figure out what's your bourbon recipe going to be? There's an expectation that you're going to do a bourbon. We wanted to do a bourbon. It's always been in the plan. The Brothers Cut was essentially that was always in the plan. The surprise was Field Days, being the all corn, was kind of like a what if product that then turned into like, I guess we'll make this all the time too. Single malt was always in the plan in terms of like the ease of using barley, in terms of not necessarily the ease of processing and mashing barley, but it's grown here.
Yeah.
And it's a newer product for us. Likewise for rye, we were always going to make a rye. The big issue early on was our equipment was not able to process rye well. Our rye is electric mayhem rye whiskey because we almost destroyed an electric still the first time. Our very first stills were all electric, and they have electric elements that are right in there with them. And rye is very gummy, it's very sticky, and it caused charring all over the elements. And we just kept doing it anyway and just beating our heads against the wall. I mean, we did a lot of things that other people would have never done in terms of like, straining grain out of mashes or cooking over propane in doing corn pots with, stirring by hand and literally doing all the old moonshining techniques.
Yeah.
But taking them as basically just the first step towards commercial viability. And now it's far more automated. It's still like two guys slinging liquids around and making a mess. But, I was covered in corn wash this morning. I took a shower before I came, but otherwise I would have smelled like a barn, and it's part of the deal.
Is it just the two of you? I mean, I know the parents and everybody, but is it just the two of you really?
It's the two of us right now. We've had some folks in and out. We have some selling folks. We've had some production folks. Right now, though, it's the lean times in terms of winter, and it really is just a two-person operation. And we've got it kind of fine-tuned to where certain days can be a one-person operation, which then allows like my brother to go out and hit the road. He does primarily most of our selling. So right now, like we might both work together on a Tuesday. Wednesday, he might split the day and do some road work. Thursday, he's going to do road work. Friday, we'll see. It's kind of like market prep at that point as well too. Fridays often we have tastings, but where it's frankly, the two of us are almost always, with the exception of Tuesday, in two different places. So like for today, right? Yeah. It takes a lot to get us in the same room. You know what I mean? In terms of like, it's not that you don't write here, but it's like if we lose a day. Right. If we both are in the same place somewhere, we lose a production day.
Huh, that's
and he had an appointment as well too, but it worked out to where, we can't lose even one distillation day at this point.
Let me try that malt.
Oh yeah.
When you were first getting started, like one of the big things today, especially amongst like some of the bigger, the bigger ones that are new, the newer bigger ones, is that they're buying their juice from, what is it?
MGP is the big one.
MGP, thank you.
Oh, there's a bunch now. There's a ton.
Was that ever like kind of a consideration when you were first starting?
It's literally never been a consideration. And it's probably not to our benefit in terms of the ability to provide more for people. It's not bad, huh?
No, I was like, my first reaction was like, oh wow, this is smoky too. But then I realized it's just picking up from the mezcal, but it's very, very good.
It's got a lot of butterscotch on the nose.
Yeah.
Malt whiskey in the U.S. Is kind of in a medium sort of transitional space right now. They just allowed for single malt whiskey to be its own thing. Previously, a malt whiskey, which is this one, type class malt whiskey in quotes, had to be aged in a new charred oak barrel. That was cooperage protection. It's going way back. So it does have more bourbon nose than like your Scotch or your Irish style. Yeah. But it finishes very Irish. It has that brassy sort of dry finish on the back end.
Age 12 months. Have you been approached by people in the years to make for them?
We've been approached to make a few like niche products. I think generally once we talk to people, they realize we just don't have the bandwidth, the production output to supply what they're looking for. We always say yes to like the conversation, as long as it's like a real conversation. We get a lot more approaches from folks who want to supply us. So right now there is bulk supply of corn-based spirits, whey-based spirits. The whole the whey waste spirits are shockingly inexpensive. And it'll let someone kind of jump in with no experience and just say, okay, I'm gonna mix whey spirits with vanilla extract. I'm gonna make a vanilla vodka, and they can be on the market as a non-distiller producer like very quickly. And they'll make pretty good money on it. It's just not the same story. It's not the same. Yeah. It's not the same sort of partnership with the land, and with the area that we have. We used to be a little more aggressive. I'd say we're still pretty aggressive. Like we have shirts and bumper stickers that say "Death to False Whiskey," and that has a little less to do with bulk sourcing and more to do with just tricking the customer.
Yeah.
So you've got a lot of high-end stuff out there and low-end stuff out there, especially in aged whiskey markets that are all from the same place.
Yeah.
And have been the whole time, and it's all marketing. Sometimes it's the age, sometimes it's the blend. What's weird is we'll get people who question like our terroir all the way through, like, oh, where's the malt coming from? Where's this from? And then they'll be like, well, I like bourbon X. I won't even say. And I'm like, that's a blended bourbon. They're like, oh, well, they're masters of blending. It's like, okay, sure. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's tricky in that I know enough with labeling now that I can pick up on your bottle and tell you like the story just based off what I can read.
Yeah.
And say, okay, so if it says produced by, they're not distilling. If it says distilled by, and it's like a vodka that's like 9 times, they bought 8 times distilled vodka and they distilled it. They ran it through a pot still, probably ruined its overall proof on the second, on the 9th pass, but they did, and they can say, okay, well, at least we distilled it. It was bought spirits, but they ran it through a still.
Yeah.
So 9 times. If it says bottled by, if it says, blended and bottled by, if it says distilled by, generally, with the exception of like that the 9th distillation vodka, it's typically made by that operator. I get a little bit confused occasionally in the certain state law stuff, but generally for the most part, you can tell what everybody's at least sourcing or at least part of their story is just based on what you can read off the label. Also with like age statements, things like that. Someone says that it's distilled, or not, it says produced and bottled by, and it's got a 2-year age statement, right? They just bought immature or MGP, at that point. It's going to tell you something about how that bourbon's going to taste. If it's a bourbon, it's going to tell you a lot about like what is their priorities as a brand,
Yeah. Yeah. Because there's, is it Penelope? Yeah, it's Penelope. Nick was telling me like he went down there to tour their facility, and it's, in Newark, and all the barrels are in shipping containers, and, I don't think they're distilling their own, right? They're buying it, buying their juice and then just barreling it, aging it.
I mean, MGP as an example makes good overall product.
Yeah.
In terms of like its availability, it's I don't necessarily I don't have experience with the exact samples themselves, but in terms of like what they have for low wines, wheat product, their raw bourbon, the White Dog bourbon that they'll sell you, generally everything is fine. But it's also very large batch, macro produced. It's not gonna, if you're looking for like, I'm gonna take some stuff and put it away in one barrel, I'm gonna have a single barrel release, you're not gonna have any single barrel notes.
Right.
It's gonna taste like it came off a continuous column still in Indiana. It's gonna be very, unless you're doing like contract for someone who wants something really unusual.
Yeah.
If it's just out of their general stock, it's gonna be fairly dull in
Right.
terms of like its overall palate. It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be bourbon. It's gonna be whiskey. It'll be all right. Everyone uses the same cooperage down there too, which is also kind of interesting to me that you got the primary producer of the juice putting it in almost all the same barrels to then send it out to 1,000 brands
Yeah.
at this point.
Yeah.
And you've got to differentiate them from each other. And they're almost all in the same book.
Right.
So like if you're we're not in Southern, but if you're in the Southern book and you go through the bourbons, probably half of them are all of the same lineage.
Yeah.
Right? They're in the they're at least in the same family tree.
Right.
In terms of where it all started.
Yeah, it is really wild to think about the spirits industry and how much is controlled by and owned by so few. You know, I mean, it's kind of like the world. It's like the wealth in the world. Like 26 individuals have 50% or whatever it is, 51% of the world's wealth. And it's kind of the same thing in the distilling world. There's like 7 massive companies that own 80% of the commercial space,
and their ability to put their like leverage on the neck is unlimited.
Oh yeah,
it's just a matter of kind of like agreement to coexist.
Yeah,
that's kind of what's allowed craft to get to this point. They definitely enter the craft space in odd ways, but I don't know of any examples where like Pernod Ricard or Sazerac has like organically reached into the craft space.
Right.
They'll buy brands.
Yeah.
I think Pernod Ricard did an interesting one in New York. They had the Our Vodka. That was unusual. That was different. They reached out to us to do some projects, and we might still do something with them. But that's kind of like their sort of they'll make sort of outreaches of say let's do something.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal. Because in the end, it's kind of everyone is looking to see what's the next thing.
Yeah.
And having a multi billion-dollar global enterprise is great but it doesn't mean anything if you don't see like canned cocktails coming.
Right.
And they all kind of follow each other and kind of trip over each other in their own space. And we kind of stay on the outside, looking around saying, okay, is there a window to even do this? No, it doesn't make sense. I'll let them fight over canned cocktails.
Yeah.
And we'll continue to just be this other story.
Yeah. What's the, I know and I've talked to Nick about this a little bit, and I know this fairly well on the brewery side. Distribution, is it as big of a pain in the ass for distillers, for yourself, as it is for some of these breweries?
I can't speak to how, the beer world works in terms of what are the expectations on them.
It sucks, I can tell you.
I know it sucks, but do we have good relationships with distribution? We do, but it's always we're always looking for more from each other, and we will always want to see more accounts. We want to see more follow-ups. They want us to do more tastings and road work, and so it's kind of like if we can meet each other in the middle and just do a little bit extra both ways, it works out pretty well. We've had some distributor relationships that are not good. They're over now. Were they predatory? No. Were they not really aware of our actual scale, and what we were hoping for out of them? Did we have the same goals in mind? I don't know. But I don't think they were predatory. We have McCraith Beverage, for Utica Rome area, and they do very well for certain areas. But we're always throughout all the rest of the areas going, oh, how come we're not here? And how come we're not there? And you can call them up and say, I want to be in this space and that space. And they say, oh, well, give us the time. Let's go do some road work, and hopefully, we can put that sort of patchwork to work, to the benefit of the customer.
Yeah.
Because if we don't, things like direct to consumer keep getting discussed.
Yeah.
And that distributors don't love that.
Right.
Liquor stores don't love that. I think in our case, we're kind of as a farm distillery, we were just in Albany doing direct to consumer lobbying, and we don't have the relationships that would end up equaling like a blacklist because we just don't have the demand.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
All right.
But other places could. If someone was a bigger operator, and let's say a regional operator, right? Let's say 10 states of distribution, for example, right? And then all of a sudden, New York is direct to consumer available, and they start putting out maybe 1,000 bottles a year. It's not that much. 1,000 bottles, talking 3 a day shipments out from your operation. It gets you statewide in terms of exposure. It's only good for your brand.
Yeah.
But
what do you mean by direct to consumer? You can't sell on your website?
Cannot sell on your website. Cannot ship to consumers.
Are you serious?
Cannot. Illegal by state law. And we're working our way towards that because it seems weird, right? Because you get probably some liquor in the mail. Okay, I don't want to out you, but liquor does occasionally show up in people's mailboxes.
So just you can't.
It all depends on state law. Right now, it's not. I can't say for certain, but there are certain states with reciprocity. DC and Kentucky can ship out to other certain states, but in terms of New York's willingness to accept shipments in, I want to say it's not legal yet.
Because Pascal's has an online thing. They can ship to a few different states.
Right.
So is it different liquor store versus distillery?
Yes, totally
Gotcha.
different.
Okay.
And they've got some rights to deliver, right? They essentially, it's an extension of their delivery rights.
Yeah.
To then just meet the consumer further.
Right.
Out.
That's fucking dumb.
Yeah, and at the same time, the Independent Liquor Store Owners Association is very powerful, and they're also our partners.
Yeah.
We don't want to upset, but we won't be there. Not maybe not us, but other distilleries will not be in existence providing that sort of greater diaspora of New York options if you don't let them ship to the people who aren't nearby.
Yeah, now it's probably a different story. Maybe when it's like Chad, who just started Chad Meeks. He just started beer distribution company. Actually, we're meeting with him tomorrow, which I'm going to talk to you about off air. And no offense, Chad, if you're listening to this, I would never buy beer from his website because, there's just so much beer that exists out there that it's probably rare. I could think of 2 beers that I would pay to have shipped to me.
It's a lot of market redundancy.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to pay for the shipping from that, and it's not going to be cost effective for him to ever do free shipping.
Right.
It's like when I started a coffee company,
Right.
Good Buddy Coffee. I bought my beans from Peaks, already roasted. I said, your mountain climber's great. I'll just take that, and I'll take your decaf and your dark roast. Wonderful. And it was cheap. It was like $3.50 a pound or whatever it was. Labels, bags. The thing that I quickly realized was it's a stupid idea to do that business because you only make your money in that side on wholesale.
Right.
If you're trying to retail, by the time somebody buys your $16 bag of coffee, they're not going to pay the $8 for shipping.
Right.
So
unless you got distribution ready to go,
right.
It's the same story for breaking brands in this business and beverage across the board. What we have in terms of like our product versus like a beer equivalent, it's a little more compact, doesn't weigh quite so much, but also like people see our stuff as they travel, and we do the state fair, and we do a lot of online promotional stuff. Maybe not enough, but people are aware of us statewide, and we hear it all the time with like, when are you going to be in Saratoga? When are you going to be here and there? And they like the story enough that the fact that they could also get something out of Lake George that's of a similar sort of origin story, that's good with them. They'll get that too, but they also want to get ours. They want to collect that as well too.
Right.
Chad's in an interesting spot in terms of like, he's got that weird license.
I know.
Where he's like distributor / shipping. We were just talking with people with the guild meeting, and people were like, we just don't know how it works. I was like, nobody knows. It's this mystery. How did he do this? And it's like, it's just a combined license, I guess. I don't know. It's been interesting to watch sort of craft beverage via our distributors, I should say, and how difficult it can be to break certain stuff in, even when it's like slam dunk stuff, and it should just be a natural thing. And sometimes it's the venue, sometimes it's the account, sometimes it's the salesperson, whatever. But it seems like it is a constant struggle for anyone with your distributor. So I would say it's not unique to anyone.
No.
And taking out a distributorship to me sounds exhausting. We talk about it like, because we can co-distribute in spirits, and I suppose we could do it across other farm licenses too, I think. And people say, "What you want to? Let's co-distribute. And if I'm a brand owner, like, I'm going to sell my stuff.
Yeah.
And this is really not a perfect space for it. I don't know. It's a real mess, and everyone who comes up with a really good idea, I'm not saying this is a bad idea.
Right.
No. It's just they all burn out,
or
they realize very quickly that they cannot put the road miles on and still make the money.
Yeah.
So unless you've got something where you're like, I'm already taking products elsewhere, I got to turn the truck back, if you got vehicles on the road already, that's a huge boon.
Yeah. I think
Remarkable Liquids is maybe still in operation, and we were carrying beer at our place, and we call them up, and they'd be like, you're X miles beyond our delivery area. And I was like, what's your delivery? They're like 5 miles from the thruway. Basically, it was like, oh, good. Like, they're really convenient. I mean, and we know that like you can be terrible and demand that a distributor show up if you want to, but it ruins your relationship. And it just kind of left it alone. So like, we don't carry beer at our place anymore because it's too hard to get it out there.
Yeah.
Unless we reach out direct and say, okay, go to the Kritzes and say, we want to carry some stuff. We would do that. We've done that, you know, with the relationships we already have. But very quickly we realized that the redundancy is real.
Yeah.
And unless you've got something that is breaking the market open, or the price point is amazing.
Yeah.
It just doesn't do a whole lot beyond certain settings.
Yeah.
Like, there's great opportunity for beer in cans in certain settings, provided that the producer can supply enough of it,
Right.
you know. And you look at things like the Mets games, and you know
Yeah.
what I mean. Anyone who's gotten to deal with the amphitheater, you know, they all love them when they get them.
Right.
It's just then like, oh man, I don't know if this is
Yeah.
what I want.
Yeah, for sure. I thought out of Abbott's this summer, I thought like, okay, there's like what craft beer is there? And what craft beer is there in Baldwinsville? There's WT, sure,
Yep.
you know, and they're making it, but there really isn't another place that like does like where you can go buy a variety of craft beer. So I was like, we're gonna become that. I've got a stand up fridge, retail, you know, I've got, you know, 8 shelves in there. We're gonna carry as much of a variety of canned beer as we can from every, like it was like I'll bring Lake Placid in and I'll, you know, all these different places. And it did absolute dog shit. Beer was like no one gave a shit about it. I was, you know, we were trying to sell like 4-packs, 6-packs to go. No one cared about it. Now maybe it's time. Maybe people just need, you know, it needs a couple years.
I think the window on the 16-ounce can 4-pack, right, was like 2017 to 2019, where you could kind of slap anything together,
Yeah.
with some creative art,
Yeah.
and it would do pretty good. I think you see some movement into retail,
Yeah.
with it, and then it just became a lot, and everyone started saying, "No, we're going to can," and then it became less and less artistic,
Yeah.
and you know, and more about like, well, we're going to kind of almost go back to the old ways of a label that we hand write, and the moment you start doing that, people's interest starts to change,
Yeah.
especially in the second location.
Yeah.
One thing to have a hand labeled growler poured by the brewer out of their place, and
Right.
you go, perfect.
Yeah.
Something else to be like, oh, it's Sharpie written on a ball can
Yeah.
at a cidery. You know what I mean?
Right.
I don't know. Like people's expectations in terms of what craft means, they will excuse a lot of semi-professionalism as long as the story's good.
Yeah.
The moment it hits the store shelf, it has to be perfect.
Fuck, that's good. Man, that's really good.
Well, our maple whiskey, right? Early on, we didn't filter it like we should.
Yeah.
Well, or I should say, like we do now. I actually liked it before. We would filter the spirit, and then we'd add the maple syrup. This is just an addition of pure maple syrup. Now, maple syrup will fall out of solution, but it makes sugar crystals. It makes mineral content. It looks cool to me.
Yeah.
But I'm also like, I like spirits nerd stuff. I don't mind seeing some barrel char or sugars falling out of solution or oils falling out of solution. Like to me, that says it's real. But if it's on a shelf and it's not perfectly amber and free of debris, the presumption is that you're poisoning people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like literally, people are going, "That's not perfect."
Yeah.
And the expectations of perfection are extremely, extremely high right now. In as much as people don't want to miss out, they also want the absolute best all the time.
Yeah.
And it has to visually check a box as much as it checks the flavor.
That's really interesting. Yeah, because like we would get at Abbott's, you know, they make their own hard cider. And I mean, I would get so many people coming through just wanting the hard cider, which, you know, frankly isn't that great. And but people just loved it. They were like, "This is the best thing I've ever had before." I'm like, "You sure about that?"
Yeah, it's fine.
But
In the moment.
right.
Yeah.
But that was the thing that they wanted. They wanted hard cider because they could see the apple trees out back, and
Yes.
they knew that it was, you know, and they wanted the growlers, and they didn't care.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It really is it's
Look at like the Italian bakery, right? I saw your Columbus bread, right? From the bakery, amazing. It's still good bread. I'm never gonna talk bad on them.
yeah,
But if you were in like a Big M in DeRuyter
right.
and you saw the Columbus bakery bread, you'd be like,
Yeah.
I don't know how it got here. You know what I mean? And that's not even saying anything bad about that store either.
Yeah.
But you're saying like it's not there's a better scenario.
sure.
Know the perfect scenario.
Yeah.
And that's not it.
Yeah. There's definitely, I mean, one of the things that we're really fortunate about here in Central New York is there are places like yourself, like I was at Columbus Bread this morning at 8 a.m.
Yeah.
right when they opened, and you know you can't even see through the window because of the steam.
And it's an experience.
Yeah,
And so much of, I mean, people fight over like what does craft mean, in every form. People say, oh, I make craft coffee. I make, craft, cheese, or I'm making, craft baked goods. I think what it means is it's beyond the product itself to an experience.
Yeah.
It's experiential, where you can say, okay, it was made by this person, either the person I met or the person whose name and signature is on the label, or the card that they stuck inside that says, thanks for buying my stuff.
Right.
Please visit my website, whatever. I think that's the big difference. And there are products that we don't think of as traditional craft because they didn't, market themselves with minimalist font and you know what I mean, and get a modern, marketing thing together that are the definition of craft, like the old school Italian bakery, or the old school Italian deli. That to me is craft. I mean, because it takes generational knowledge.
Right.
You can definitely just jump into it, but you're learning at the same time that you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, Panchitos, I think, is good. Mm-hmm. I've learned at Panchitos over the last year that you have to know how to order because, if you've been in there before.
I have to admit, I've never had it.
So they're right down the street.
Yeah.
But it's like a local Moe's. Like you go in there, it's a burrito, it's tacos. What do you want? And they put it in there. If you don't know what the fuck you're ordering or what you want in there, it's going to taste like shit. I learned last year to go down there and tell Michael, hey, whatever you eat, that's what I want. Yeah. And then it's amazing. But I had the dad on the podcast a couple months ago and learning the story that he grew up in a 3-4 generation bakery here in Syracuse. Yeah. And that they had they had their kids, but then they had adopted or through foster care so many kids.
The story gets real.
That he opened the restaurant so that way his kids would be able to have jobs. Yeah. And that he got some of these recipes from a trip to Mexico. I'm like, I'm sold on Panchitos.
All laudable stuff. Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I'm going to Panchitos now every chance that I can. Yeah. So there is that aspect. I feel, and I've been saying it for the past couple of weeks on the podcast, when I first, 7-8 years ago, we started Eat Local New York, and even just before COVID, it felt like there was more of an intentional focus on that quality. The early days of the pandemic, it was like, hey, what can I get that's here in the backyard?
Local one.
Right.
Local was the thing.
We've lost that, I think.
It's weird. Like, there are still people who shop local intentionally. That is a big majority of our consumers, folks who are like saying, I want this because it's local. I like it.
Yeah.
I enjoy it. But also I like that it's also from here too. We're seeing a little bit of a turn.
Yeah.
It's starting market-wise, people are starting to look more for quantity.
Yeah.
Looking for deals. For the first time in a long time, we're getting people who are debating price because they're not sure if it's something that they can invest. They'll still buy a lot of local goods, but there's something about like the $42 bourbon or the $33 gin or whatever that makes them go, do I want local enough?
Yeah.
For this particular experience. And then some folks don't care at all.
Right.
Like, we still have tons of folks who are just like, you make it? Awesome. I liked it.
Yeah.
Give me a bottle. Give me 2, whatever it is. But there's a little bit more debate over, I think people still want to buy local, but I think they're starting to more consider the global market.
Yeah.
And they're also expecting shipping. Again, going back to DTC, people expect it to come to them.
Right.
And that's the opposite of local in terms of the willingness to pay for shipping from anywhere. So we get a lot of folks who reach out and they're like, your products look interesting. I've never heard of them before. Can you ship to me and such? And it's like, wow, that's neat. That's cool. But like in my head, I was like, you could also just, there's local stuff in your area too. You know what I mean? They're just going more collecting. And I still want their business. Right. I'm so happy that we got their attention. But people are just sort of on the internet looking through going, oh, cool, neat website. Oh, I like the TikTok. You know what I mean? That was cool. And we could probably do more of that stuff. And what would happen, right? So let's say we get a TikTok. Theoretically, I was thinking about this with my wife the other day. You get 150,000 likes out of it, 1 million views, right? And people go, I want your stuff. You can't.
Yeah, you're fucked. Yeah.
You can't get it. You can't. I mean, we could try to leverage it in. By the time we could leverage it into a multi-state deal, we don't have enough. And 2, like, the moment would be over.
Right. Well, I will say, I mean, when I was talking about TikTok specifically, I mean, Nicole, that's one of the reasons why I hired her was, because she gets that, first of all, I didn't have time to do it, to sit there and pump out the video content that we've been putting out over the last month. And second of all, she understands that stuff more than I do in terms of like how to edit those quick videos. But when we were starting 3-1 Fried, I was making videos of like, hey, I'm opening up my first restaurant. And today, like, here's the list of things I have to do to open. And today I have to figure out takeout containers. So I'm going to take this container and that container. I'm going to make a sandwich and tater tots, leave it in there for 15 minutes, open it up and see which one the food tastes better out of. Sure. Those videos were getting like 100,000 views on TikTok. And people kept saying, I wish you were in St. Louis. I wish you were here. I wish you were there. So that just taught me really quickly. I need to have, like, if I'm going to do that stuff for a brand again, I need to have T-shirts and stickers and hats and all this stuff on my website ready for them to buy to make money off of.
I think about, like, we are able to enter that space, but I think we'd have to really push the location. Yeah. And say, this is where you're going to come to. Right. You're not far. You're in New York City or wherever. Yeah. You get enough views, you're going to get some people who are in here. You get the algorithm will tune it down to where we got Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, New York. We'll get seen. And we got to push it as this is your next destination. Yeah. You know what I mean? And get people to come to us. Because that is really the only way it works out. Yeah. Versus saying, I'm in, northern New York and I like this thing. How can I get it? And it's like, you got a 4-hour drive. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah. I had just had Eddie Brennan on the podcast and it was really interesting just thinking about how massive they are. Huge. And yeah, so, well, thanks, man. Hey, thank you. I had a great time talking. Yeah, it was great. For everybody who's listening, Old Home Distillers, is it Distillers? Old Home Distillers, yeah. Distillers. And Old Home Distillers, check them out. Regional Market every Saturday. Yeah, we also do Oneida County Public Market every other Saturday through the winter. And when we get into the summer, we're at Hamilton and Cazenovia markets as well. And then stores and restaurants and bars all throughout Central New York. So if you're a restaurant that's listening or liquor store, who's your distributor? If you're in this area, Onondaga Beverage. If you're over Utica, Rome area, I'm a Craith Beverage. Or you can also reach out direct to us and we'll get you lined up for areas outside that space. Awesome. All right. Thank you. Thank you.